So Tracy will be next. Let's give Tracy a big round of applause. Come on.
My friend David gave me a book and said, read this. It made me think of you. It reminded me of you. And the book was called My Year of Meat. And he said, no, really, the main character, she's you. The main character was Japanese American. She was tall, and she was fearless. She was fearless in love. She was fearless in her career. She just did it. And in the years since he gave me the book, I've completely forgotten the plot. But I love to remember that somewhere I've got a friend who thinks that I, too, am fearless as I stand up here with my voice trembling. And I like to remind myself of that, especially if I'm like taking a job in a new city or internet dating, or letting a group of strangers talk me into bungee jumping in Zambia. I was looking for something new, some meaning to my life, and the Peace Corps was asking for way too much time. And I started floating the idea of maybe volunteering with Doctors Without Borders. And so David considered my qualifications as a TV marketing professional and said, well, maybe fake Doctors Without Borders is hiring. So I ended up hooking up with Habitat for Humanity because they'll take anybody. And I was building houses here and abroad, and last summer we celebrated the end of a build in Africa, or planned on celebrating it, by jumping off of a bridge, as one does. Except I had no intention of joining in this celebration. I built a fine house, but I was not jumping off that bridge. And I had this in my head even as I stood in line with the rest of my team and paid for the bungee jump and signed all the release forms and just thought, yeah, no, it's not gonna happen. And the guy who took my money looked up and said, well, now there's no turning back. And I thought, that's not really comforting, because people who bungee jump are sort of counting on the return trip. And we were perched about 400 feet over the Zambezi River. And if I went through with this, I was going to plummet 30 stories before the bungee cord even started to hold. And I learned I would be plummeting at 32 feet per second squared. No, I'm just not going to do that. And the 30-story drop made this the second highest bungee jump in the world. And doing it would make me the second stupidest person that I know, or at least the second craziest person that I knew, behind my friend David. David said, LA brings the crazy out in everybody. And he said that right after he was dumped by a woman who thought that he didn't care enough about the movie The Goonies. And while we were roommates here, my crazy kind of came out, because it was while I was living here that I accidentally broke 3 of my own bones because of jealousy. And when that didn't work, I lost 15 pounds and dated a gay alcoholic, because that'll show him. And David loved these stories because they made him the most sane person at the breakfast table, where his omelet was garnished with half a dozen anxiety meds. And a couple years later, and thousands of miles away on this bridge in Zambia, I was finally learning the difference between fearless and crazy. And jumping off of a perfectly good bridge is not fearless. And I wasn't going to admit that to my team members because they were pretty gung-ho. So instead of chickening out, I volunteered to go 7th. The bus to the airport was leaving in about an hour, and it gave us just enough time for 6 people to jump. And there was a really good chance that 7 was not going to be able to squeak in. So I graciously volunteered to go 7th. They said, oh, you would do that for us? That is so generous. I know. Because I'm fearless. And so they actually wrote the number, on our arm, the order in which we were going, because in Zambia, Big Magic Marker 7 is a binding contract. And so as we were marching out to the bridge, the rest of my gang starts getting really spiritual, and they're just talking about how free they're going to feel when their feet leave the bridge, and how they're going to be looking in the face of death, and feeling so alive. And I'm like, No, really, you guys are just going to get a good photo for Facebook and a headache because you're dangling upside down. And that was probably something David would have said, you know, because it was sardonic and funny, and I was feeling kind of edgy because I had not had Xanax for breakfast, but really wish I had, and I was just kind of stroking my number 7 for good luck and thinking, this will get me out of this. And when we got out to the middle of the span, the guy in charge, our jump master, had a whole different playbook than the guy with the magic marker, and he said, yeah, this morning we're going to mix it up. Because what you really want to hear the teenager in charge of the high-risk sport in a developing country say is the phrase, mix it up. And he said, he's looking at his clipboard, he's like, those numbers on your arm? And I'm stroking my 7, like, yes. He said, they're meaningless, they mean nothing. And he says, number 1 is not going first. And meanwhile, number 1 is already harnessed up, and he's popping his Dramamine, and the guy looks back and says, 7 goes first. I'm sorry, we have a binding contract. We have an agreement. It's an ink. And he says, well, 7 goes first or not at all. And so my crowd is saying, go, go, do it. I'm thinking, how many crazy things in history have been accompanied by a crowd chanting, go, go, do it. So I climb over the railing, and I get in my harness, and my ankles are bound. I can still turn back, though. The teenager helps me hop over to the edge. I can still turn back. And when my feet leave the bridge, I wait for that feeling of freedom to replace the feeling of fear. Not long after he gave me that book, my friend David took his own leap when the voices in his head said, go, go, do it. And when he climbed over the railing and jumped from the ship and went into the Atlantic and never came to the surface. And I hope that when his feet left, he felt that freedom, and that he didn't feel what I was feeling, that this was the stupidest thing anyone could do, and that there's no turning back. Thanks.
Give her a round of applause. That's a great story.